Hey everyone, it's Dr. NightStare. Glad you're here. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Alright, let's get settled. Get comfortable, let your body relax, and just take it easy. My car died on the long stretch of highway, the engine making one final gurgle before everything ceased. The sudden quiet swallowed the night around me, pressing in close. My headlights still worked, casting weak cones of light onto the cracked asphalt directly in front of the bumper. Beyond that small illuminated circle, an immense blackness opened up on all sides. I tried the ignition again, twisting the key, but the engine only coughed without catching. I tried it a second time, then a third, the sound of the starter motor growing weaker with each attempt until it too gave up. A cold dread seeped into my chest, a feeling that went deeper than the chill of the autumn night. I pulled my phone from the console, its screen a bright rectangle in the oppressive darkness. My signal bars flickered erratically, showing one moment of hope before disappearing completely, leaving only a red X. I tried to call for a tow, the phone raising to my ear, but the call never connected. A recorded voice spoke about unavailable service. I stepped out of the car, feeling the grit of the shoulder beneath my sneakers. The air was cold and still. I looked down the road, then up the road, searching for any sign of another car, any distant headlight. But nothing moved on the black ribbon of highway. The stars were brilliant above me, an endless scattering of pinpricks that only emphasized my smallness on the ground. A gust of wind rustled through the dry roadside weeds, making them whisper. I leaned against the car door, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. Every passing minute stretched longer than the last, and the isolation intensified with each beat of my heart. My eyes strained into the darkness, searching for something that was not there. The highway felt like a tunnel, endlessly long and utterly empty. I swallowed, my throat dry. My breath hitched in my chest. I knew I was alone out here, truly alone. And the sheer emptiness of the night around me began to feel like a presence, watching. I just needed the tow truck to arrive. The beam of headlights cut through the deep darkness from far down the highway. I watched them grow steadily brighter, hoping for the tow truck, hoping for anyone at all. The car slowed, its high beam sweeping across my broken vehicle and then settling on me. A dark pickup truck, mud splattered and sturdy, pulled to a stop a few car lengths ahead. The driver's side window rolled down with a soft whir. A man leaned across the seat, his face mostly shadowed but his voice clear and kind. "Car trouble?" he called out. "Looks like you're stuck." My heart, which had been hammering with dread, gave a lurch of immediate relief. "Yes," I called back, my voice shaky. "It just died. I can't get a signal." He nodded slowly. "Happens out here. I'm Gary." He had a warm, even tone. "There's a rest stop about 5 miles up the road. Usually pretty quiet but well lit. There's a landline there. You could call for help properly." He gestured towards his truck with an open hand. "Hop in. I can give you a lift. It's no trouble at all. I was just heading that way myself." His offer felt too convenient, fitting perfectly into the exact gap of my desperation. I hesitated, my stomach tightening again, but the vast emptiness of the highway pressed in around me. His expression remained steady, a picture of simple concern. I imagined the safety of the rest stop, a place with light and people, a working phone. That thought outweighed the small, unformed worry that had flickered inside me. I climbed into the passenger seat, the truck's interior smelling faintly of pine air freshener and old coffee. He pulled away smoothly, turning the truck around, and the last sight of my car shrinking in the rearview mirror brought another wave of unease. Gary drove at a steady speed, not too fast, not too slow. He made small talk, asking where I was headed, if I was from around here. His questions were casual, normal questions, but I felt myself answering them with a careful reserve. He kept his eyes on the road, occasionally glancing at me, his face illuminated by the dash lights. He talked about his work, about the long drives he often took at night. He seemed to enjoy the solitude of the road, mentioning it several times, and a quiet shiver ran down my arms. He kept his hands firm on the steering wheel, his gaze unwavering on the black asphalt stretching ahead. I focused on the dim glow of the dashboard lights and the occasional glint of his eyes in the periphery of my vision. After what felt like a very long 10 minutes, we saw the distant glow of lights. The rest stop appeared as a cluster of bright lights in the overwhelming darkness. My shoulders relaxed slightly. He pulled into the parking lot, past a few semi-trucks and a couple of lone cars. The building itself was a low brick structure, well lit by harsh overhead lamps. He parked near the entrance, under the brightest light available. He turned off the engine, and the sudden quiet was less oppressive here, softened by the distant drone of passing highway traffic and the general murmur of the rest stop itself. He turned to me, his face fully visible in the electric light. His eyes, though still seemingly kind, held a strange stillness now that the urgency of the rescue was over. "There you go," he said, his voice softer now. "Go on in and make your call. You'll be safe here." He made no move to get out of the truck, his hands resting on the steering wheel again. His gaze settled on me. The light from the building spilled through the windshield, highlighting the slight lines around his mouth, the steady set of his jaw. I reached for the door handle, feeling a sudden, inexplicable rush to get out, to be standing on my own 2 feet again in the bright public space. I fumbled with the door handle, eager to step onto solid ground. "Hold on a minute, Claire," he said, his voice quiet now, no longer projecting kindness, but something different, something thin and stretched. He did not move his body, but his head turned fully toward me, and his eyes held a fixed intensity under the bright rest stop lights. "We are out of the darkness now, but I want to show you something here. Just for a moment." "Show me what?" I asked, my hand still on the door handle, my fingers tracing the cold metal. A prickle started on the back of my neck. "Come on out," he said, pushing open his own door. "But just stay close to the truck. We can stand here, just on the edge of the light." He stepped out, his tall frame illuminated by the overhead lamps, but he moved towards the darker fringes of the parking lot, away from the main building entrance. His movement drew my gaze with him. I hesitated for only a second, then pushed my door open and stepped out onto the asphalt. The air was cool, and I hugged my arms to myself. I stood near the open door of his truck, looking towards the brightly lit building. Gary walked a few steps away, moving past the farthest reach of the direct light, and then he stopped. He looked back at me, his face half shadowed by the eaves of the truck, half illuminated by the spill from the rest stop. "Come here," he said, his voice a low command. "Just over here, where the light meets the dark." I felt a strange obedience, a pull that came from a deeper place than my conscious mind. My feet moved slowly, carrying me towards him, away from the immediate safety of the bright lights. I stopped a few feet from him, standing precisely where the electric light began to fade into the deeper gloom of the undeveloped land bordering the rest stop. The quiet of the night pressed in again, softened by the distant highway drone. Gary turned his full attention to me. His eyes were wide and steady, unblinking. "I often drive this highway," he began, his voice a monotone, a flat recitation of facts. "I work nights, and the road is usually empty. I see many women just like you, stranded on the side of the road." He paused, and the pause stretched long and thin, filled with an unsettling weight. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to move, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, heavy on the cool asphalt. A chill, deeper than the night air, began to seep into my bones. "I stop for them," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "almost every time. I always offer help. A lift, a phone call." He gestured vaguely back towards the brightly lit building, the light catching a slight sheen on his skin. "Just like I did for you, Claire. I picked you up out of the darkness and brought you here." He took a shallow breath, his gaze fixed on my face, searching, assessing. His mouth was a tight, thin line. "Do you know why I stop, Claire?" I shook my head slowly, my mouth dry, my jaw tight. I could not speak a single word. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from physical fear, but from a deep dread that began to bloom inside me. "I stop because I want to see them," he said, his voice dropping another notch, becoming almost a secret shared in the dimness between the light and the dark. "I want to see the fear in their eyes, the desperation. I want to be the one who finds them, who is there for them, alone in the dark, when nobody else is around. I want to be the one who knows their vulnerability completely." His words were calm, utterly devoid of any overt menace, his expression strangely placid, but a coldness spread through my veins, a creeping frost that settled deep in my core. "I imagined what I could do," he confessed, and his eyes seemed to light with a strange internal glow that had no warmth. "The things I could take, the power I would have over them, the quiet satisfaction of it all. I think about it, Claire, all the time. Every time I see a woman alone out here, a woman just like you, I think about it. The details play out in my mind, over and over, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days after I have left them safe. My stomach twisted into a tight, sickening knot. My skin felt clammy, and a dizzying sensation washed over me. I wanted to scream, to run, but the sound lodged in my throat and my legs felt heavy, unresponsive. This was not the violence I had feared from the highway, a quick, brutal end. This was something far more insidious, a slow, sickening reveal of a darkness that had no physical manifestation, but lived only in his quiet, calculating mind. "But I never do anything," he said, his voice hardening with a peculiar blend of frustration and self-control. His hands clenched slightly at his sides, then relaxed. "Never. Not once. I get them to a safe place. I leave them there, because I am afraid." He shifted his weight, his gaze dropping to the ground for a brief moment before snapping back to me, the intensity returning. "I am afraid of getting caught. I am afraid of the consequences that would follow. The jail cell, the judgment, the loss of my own life. So I just think about it. I drive away, and I think about what I could have done. The vivid thoughts are enough for me sometimes. They keep me company on the long, empty drives." He lifted his hand, then let it fall. A gesture of helplessness or perhaps resignation, a man burdened by his own nature. And then I find another one, another stranded woman alone in the dark. The compulsion rises up again, and the cycle starts again, endlessly repeating itself out here on the highway. He looked at me with an almost pleading expression, as if seeking understanding for the burden he carried. "It is a terrible thing to have these thoughts, Claire, to live with them. But I never hurt anyone. I never will. I am just a man who stops." He held my gaze, and I saw a desolate, lonely acknowledgement in his eyes, a confession of his own twisted humanity. He was not asking for forgiveness, only for my silent witness to his private torment. The air between us felt charged with the unspoken horrors of his mind, a silent psychological violation that left me feeling utterly exposed. Gary held my gaze for a long moment, his eyes filled with that desolate acknowledgement. Then he looked away, towards the dark highway, his confession over. "Go make your call, Claire," he said, his voice flat and final, devoid of the earlier kindness. He made no move to get out, simply sat there, waiting. I finally found my legs, turning away from him. My steps were heavy, walking back towards the bright lights of the rest stop building. I did not look back at him. My hand shook as I pushed open the glass door and entered the quiet of the building. I found the payphone on the wall, its receiver cold in my hand. I dialed the roadside assistance number, speaking the necessary details into the mouthpiece, my voice sounding distant and mechanical even to myself. The wait for the tow truck blurred. Every distant car sound, every shadow held Gary's presence. I watched the entrance, half expecting his truck to return, even though I knew he was gone. When the yellow tow truck finally pulled into the lot, its flashing lights sweeping the darkness, I felt a deep, shaky wave of relief. The driver was a normal, kind man, asking only about my vehicle. He hooked my car up, securing it with practiced movement. I climbed into the tow truck's passenger seat. The worn fabric felt solid. We drove away from the rest stop, leaving lingering shadows and bright lights behind. My car followed behind us. Gary had done nothing physical to me. Not a scratch, not a touch, no overt threat. But his words had stripped something away, a layer of protection I had not known I possessed. I carried the weight of his thoughts, the intimate details of his dark imaginings, the chilling compulsion he nursed. The nothing happened felt like a lie. How could I explain this to anyone? What evidence could I offer? He was just a man who stopped, a man who gave a lift. He remained free, unburdened by his own internal monologue, while I was left with the cold, indelible imprint of his predatory mind. He was still out there driving the dark highways, stopping for other women, an enduring, unprovable threat in the vast, indifferent night. The world, once uncertain, now felt truly dangerous in a way I had never known. The day after Liam's funeral, the house felt too large, the air too still around us. Mother sat on the living room sofa, her hands clasped around a teacup that had grown cold hours ago, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Father stood by the front window, his broad shoulders hunched, watching the steady rain outside wash over the empty street. I walked into the kitchen, my quiet footsteps distinct on the floorboards, each sound lingering. No usual morning clatter of Liam's cereal bowl came from the table, no shouts from his room upstairs demanding attention. The house held only the quiet tick of the clock in the hall and the gentle hiss of water running through the pipes, sounds that usually vanished beneath the bustle of our lives, beneath Liam's vibrant presence. We moved through the rooms with a carefulness, performing small tasks, each action deliberate in the heavy quiet that now filled our home. Then the doorbell rang. It was late, past midnight, the kind of hour when only bad news or a mistake arrives. Father looked up, startled, his face drawn. Mother's head snapped towards the door, a sudden jolt of confusion on her face. Who could be there now? I walked towards the door, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I turned the lock and pulled the door open. Liam stood there. He was soaked from the rain, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. His clothes, the same dark suit he wore for his funeral, clung to him, wet and mud-streaked. His eyes, though, were what caught me. They held no light, only a deep, flat blackness that seemed to absorb the dim hallway illumination. A desperate hope filled me, a rush of joy and terror. My voice seized in my throat. Liam? I breathed the name, barely a sound. He stepped inside, his movements stiff, almost unnatural. He looked at each of us, his gaze lingering on Mother, then Father, then me. His lips parted, a dry, cracking sound escaped. They are coming, he said, his voice raspy and alien. You need to go. Now. My parents stared, their faces draining of color. Father took a step back, his hand rising as if to ward off a blow. Mother made a small, choked sound, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter disbelief. Liam was here, he was alive, yet he spoke of things that could not be true. The impossibility of his presence warred with the chilling reality of his words, a desperate, rising dread. Liam's warning hung in the air, a cold, unnatural breath. He turned slowly, his black eyes sweeping over us one last time, a silent plea or an accusation in their depth. Then he walked back out into the rain, leaving the door slightly ajar. We did not move, did not speak, simply watched the empty doorway as the rain continued to fall. The sound suddenly filled the house, days blurred into a haze of unspoken terror. We tried to return to some semblance of life, each of us pretending his words had been a delusion, a cruel hallucination brought on by grief. We avoided looking at the door, avoided the windows after dark, but the quiet dread settled over us. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside became a potential threat. Father checked the locks again and again. Mother retreated further into herself, her gaze often fixed on the front door, a fearful expectancy in her eyes. I felt a cold knot tightening in my stomach, a constant awareness of the outside world pressing in. It happened again a week later. The doorbell rang just after midnight. This time the sound ripped through the fabricated calm of our denial. Father, his face pale and drawn, walked to the door with slow, desperate movements. Mother clutched my arm, her grip painful. He peered through the peephole, then stumbled back, a gasp escaping his lips. His hand trembled as he unlatched the locks. Liam stood there again. He was worse. His gray skin pulled taut over his cheekbones, and his lips were cracked and bleeding. One eye sagged slightly, a milky film clouding its surface, while the other still held that terrifying, flat blackness. He shivered, his body shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from some inner torment. His torn suit was caked with mud and what looked like dried blood, a dark stain blossoming across his chest. "They are closer," he croaked, his voice a raw whisper, barely audible over the rain. "They know you know. Let me in. They are here." Father recoiled further, a guttural sound rising in his throat. This was not our Liam, not fully. Mother started to weep, her body shaking. The image of the son we buried, the boy we loved, warred with this broken, frightening thing on our doorstep. I felt a cold fear mix with something else, a protective urge to keep this out. It was no longer about saving Liam, but about saving ourselves. "Let me in," Liam pleaded, his voice gaining a desperate edge. He took a staggering step forward. Father slammed his hand against the doorframe, stopping Liam. "No," he said, his voice thick with agony and resolve. "You cannot come in." He did not come in. He did not call him Liam. He just said you. A terrible silence descended, broken only by the incessant rain. Liam's good eye, the one still black and piercing, fixed on Father with a wounded intensity that twisted my gut. He was a stranger. He was a monster. He was still our son. Then the sounds began. A faint scratching started on the side of the house, a dragging noise that moved along the wall. It was just outside, too close. A soft thud echoed from the porch floor, the sound wet, then another, as if something heavy had been dropped. A whisper, low and deep, seemed to slither from the shadows beyond our porch light. A language I could not understand but felt deep in my bones. Liam stared past us into the darkness of our living room, his face contorted with pure terror. "They are here for you all," he rasped, his voice barely a breath. He turned slowly, his eyes now wide with a terror that mirrored our own, but was far deeper, far more immediate. He looked at the shadows, at the corners of our house, at the street beyond. The scratching intensified, now joined by a scraping sound closer to the door, a slow, deliberate movement against the wood. Father, his face a mask of horrified decision, shoved the door closed with heavy force, his action desperate. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot in the sudden quiet. Father's sudden, desperate action of closing the door left a ringing quiet. He stared at the locked door, his chest heaved, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. He moved to the small glass panel beside the door, bending low to peer through it. His gaze dropped to the ground outside. I moved closer, following his terrified stare, and then I saw them. Not just Liam's muddy prints, but many others, crisscrossing the wet porch planks, trailing into the flower beds, leading all around the house. Their shapes were odd, long and narrow, with multiple points, unlike anything human. A cold shiver ran through me, confirming Liam's warning. Mother pulled away from my side, stumbling back into the living room. Her hands covered her mouth. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice thin. Father stood upright, turning to face us. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape. "There is no escape," he said, his voice final. "We are trapped." The house groaned around us. The scratching sounds on the side walls began again. They were louder, more numerous, a frantic sound that seemed to surround the entire structure. Thumps began on the roof, soft at first, then growing heavier. Objects dropped repeatedly onto the shingles. A scraping noise started at the front windows, a long grind against the glass that made us flinch. We heard shifting sounds from the back door, a soft, insistent rattling of the handle. They were testing every entry point. Then, piercing through the clamor, Liam's voice echoed. It was distorted, stretched, a chilling sound that seemed to emanate from the very air within the house, from the walls and the floor. "You cannot hide forever," he whispered. The words slithered into every corner, filling the space with his dread. "They are here for you all. They know you know." The voice faded, replaced by a greater assault. A violent banging started against the front door. The force shook the entire frame, threatening to splinter the wood. The sounds grew louder, more frantic, a relentless pounding that rattled the pictures on the walls. Then the doorbell rang. It rang once, then again, a ceaseless piercing peal that drilled into my brain. I looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. It read 17:13 a.m. The doorbell kept ringing, a continuous demanding chime announcing their inevitable entry, a promise of horror that would never stop. Daniel always sought me out. For years his presence loomed over my life, a constant threat waiting to emerge. I was frail, an easy target for his cruel games, and he relished every moment of my misery. He particularly loved watching my eyes well up with fear, a twisted satisfaction glowing in his own as I trembled. This unending torment carved deep into my spirit, leaving me hollow and alone. One Tuesday in late January, a freezing wind whipped through the school grounds, biting at exposed skin. I walked home, hugging my books close, and the air stung my cheeks. Daniel appeared from behind the row of snow-laden hedges, blocking my path. He showed a predatory smile. He said nothing, simply shoved me against the icy brick wall, and my head struck the hard surface. Pain exploded behind my eyes, blurring the world. He grabbed my coat collar, lifting me, then slammed my body back against the wall repeatedly. My bones ached. He swung his fist, connecting with my nose, and blood immediately gushed hot down my chin. I crumpled to the ground, disoriented, seeing the world spin. Daniel knelt over me, his face close, and I saw tears streaming from his eyes, not from sorrow but from an unsettling intensity. This unusual display did not stop him. He kept hitting me, a relentless assault of blows raining down on my ribs, my stomach, my arms. I curled into a ball, trying to protect myself, unable to fight back, and each impact stole my breath. He finally stood, leaving me sprawled on the cold concrete, my body racked with throbbing pain. I lay there, helpless and broken, feeling the icy ground against my cheek, and a single thought formed clearly in my battered mind. I wanted Daniel to die. Daniel did not appear at school the next day. He did not come the day after that either, or the rest of the week. A fragile peace began to settle over me, though the memory of his brutal attack still throbbed beneath my skin. My body slowly healed, but a deep uneasiness remained. Christmas break arrived, and I retreated into myself, unable to shake the lingering fear. I spent the first quiet days watching the snow fall, feeling distant from everything. My mother noticed my quiet demeanor one afternoon. She sat beside me on the couch, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her presence warm. She spoke gently about bullies, explaining how their cruelty often comes from their own unhappiness, and sometimes they simply disappear. She promised the upcoming Christmas would bring true happiness, a special time for forgetting bad things and embracing joy. Her comforting words, delivered with a steady voice, slowly began to mend my spirits. I started to look forward to the festive lights and the sweet scent of baking cookies. Our house filled with the sound of cheerful carols. The rich smell of pine needles from our tree now brought a sense of calm. I helped my mother decorate, carefully hanging each sparkling ornament. The simple act brought back a forgotten joy. The warmth of the season began to wash over me, pushing Daniel's hateful face further from my thoughts. I started to believe in the promise of a peaceful Christmas, a hopeful new beginning. Christmas morning burst with light. The air smelled of pine and cinnamon. I woke feeling immense joy. My parents sat by the glowing tree in the living room. We drank hot chocolate, and I eagerly tore into the presents. Each gift brought a smile, a toy robot, a new book, a soft sweater. My mother watched me with warmth. My father chuckled at my excitement. The entire world felt right. After the last identified gift was opened, my mother pointed to a remaining package tucked behind the tree. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, completely unadorned. A small tag was tied to the string, simply printed with the name Nick. My mother picked it up. She looked at my father with a questioning gaze. My father shook his head. They did not recognize the parcel. They knew nothing about it. They said they had not placed it there. My mother handed the brown package to me. The paper felt thick against my fingers. I pulled at the string, untying the knot. The paper tore easily. Inside, a wooden box rested there. It was dark, smoothly finished. I lifted the lid slowly, my fingers trembling with curiosity. A terrible smell erupted into the air. It was metallic and rotten. My mother screamed, a sharp sound piercing the festive quiet. My father cried out, a choked gasp. My own eyes stared down into the box. Daniel Carson's head looked up at me. His eyes were wide. His mouth was open. Blood matted his hair. His skin was pale. My parents reeled back in horror. They gripped each other tightly, their faces white. My mother covered her mouth with a shaking hand. My father stumbled back against the couch. They stared at the box, then at me. But a warmth spread through my chest. A smile stretched across my face. It was knowing. I could not stop it. A gurgling laugh bubbled from my throat. It escaped me, uncontrollable. My laughter filled the quiet room. My stomach growled, a hollow sound against the eviction notice taped to my apartment door. The landlord's bold red handwriting glared at me, demanding last month's rent plus a late fee. My savings account showed a single digit. I pushed past the flyer, careful not to tear the notice, and entered my cramped studio apartment. Empty ramen packets overflowed the small trash can. Unopened textbooks lay scattered across the floor. My phone buzzed with another ignored call from my mother, surely asking about tuition money I did not have. A few weeks ago, a military recruiter had approached me outside the campus library. His pressed uniform and bright smile stood out against the tired students. He talked about steady pay and a future free of debt. I had just shaken my head and walked away, focusing on my next exam. He appeared again by the cafeteria, then near the student union building. His presence became a persistent interruption in my daily struggle. I always found a way to avoid his gaze, dismissing his words. Yesterday, a plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox. It had no return address. The paper felt thick and expensive. I tore it open, expecting junk mail or another bill. Inside was a single sheet of paper with stark black print. It offered an immediate opportunity to participate in a medical study. The compensation amount was staggering, more money than I could possibly earn in years of part-time work. It promised a fast solution to all my problems, a way to pay the rent and tuition. My hands shook as I reread the details. A desperate hope grew inside my chest. This was it. I followed the printed directions to a long stretch of highway that became increasingly desolate. The pavement turned rough and cracked, leading deep into a landscape of scrub brush and stunted trees. My old sedan protested with every bump, the engine whining as I finally spotted the facility. It rose from the flat land like a block of dark, unyielding concrete, several stories high with no visible windows. A tall chain-link fence topped with razor wire encircled the entire perimeter. The only entrance was a heavy steel gate with a small guard shack. My hopeful anticipation began to curdle into a cold knot in my stomach. This place did not look like a medical clinic. A uniformed guard waved me through the gate without speaking. I parked in the empty lot and walked toward the building's main entrance. The air felt heavy and still. A single door of brushed metal slid open before I reached it. Inside, the same recruiter stood waiting. His smile seemed too wide, his eyes too bright for the dim, sterile hallway. He extended a hand that gripped mine with surprising force. "Donovan, so glad you made it," he said, pulling me forward. His voice carried an artificial warmth that did not match the cold building. He did not offer any explanation or pleasantries beyond that greeting. He simply turned and led me down another hallway, his stride purposeful and fast. My questions died on my tongue as he ignored my attempts to speak, his focus fixed ahead. We passed several identical metal doors before he stopped at one and motioned me inside. The room was small, stark, and too bright. White walls and a white floor gleamed under overhead lights. The only furniture was a single chair positioned in the center. It was not a comfortable medical recliner. It was an intimidating metal frame with thick leather straps hanging from the armrests and leg rests. A head restraint jutted from the top. My heart pounded against my ribs. "Just get comfortable," the recruiter said, his smile still fixed on his face. He pushed me toward the chair. I resisted for a moment, my mind racing, but his grip on my arm was unyielding. He maneuvered me into the seat. Before I could voice my panic, he moved with practiced efficiency, tightening the straps around my wrists, ankles, and chest. The leather dug into my skin, holding me fast. I strained against the restraints, fear now a burning acid in my throat. "What is this?" I managed to choke out. The recruiter leaned close, his smile finally fading, replaced by a vacant look. His eyes held no warmth, no recognition. "The opportunity," he stated, his voice flat and empty. He turned away and picked up a large syringe from a nearby counter. The needle glinted under the harsh lights. A clear, viscous liquid filled the chamber. It was then I understood. I was not a volunteer in a medical trial. I was the trial. My screams were swallowed by the silence of the room. The needle plunged into my arm. A cold liquid pushed into my veins. It became a burning sensation that spread quickly through my chest. Then a strange euphoria bloomed inside me. It was not a gentle warmth, but a surge of raw power. My muscles tensed, buzzing with an energy I had never known. The chair's straps became flimsy. My body pulsed with a raw power. A furious heat erupted in my mind, erasing all thought except an uncontrollable rage. My vision narrowed to a crimson haze. The leather bands snapped under the sudden expansion of my limbs. I tore the thick straps from my wrists and ankles, the metal frame groaning as I twisted free. I rose from the shattered chair, my body vibrating with an immense, terrifying strength. The door burst open. 2 figures in dark uniforms rushed in. They carried heavy stun batons. I did not hesitate. My hand shot out, grabbing the first man's head. I twisted, and his neck broke with a wet crack. I threw his limp body against the wall. The second guard stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. I lunged, my fingers closing around his throat. I squeezed until his struggles stopped. The recruiter appeared in the doorway, his face pale with horror. He began to back away, stumbling. I moved faster than he could react. I seized him, lifting his struggling form from the floor. His bones crunched in my grip. I bit into his neck, tearing away flesh. Hot blood gushed into my mouth. I consumed his soft organs, the taste filling me with a savage satisfaction. I then tore into the bodies of the guards, ripping away muscle and sinew, consuming everything I could. A gnawing hunger took hold, deeper than any I had known. My old life, the eviction notice, the tuition, my mother's calls. All those concerns dissolved into nothing. They were meaningless, replaced by a singular, overwhelming instinct. My mind cleared of everything except the burning need for more. I needed food. The primal command resonated through my rewired being, overriding every past thought, every human memory. The world outside this room held only one promise: more food to satisfy the insatiable hunger now driving me. The night was dark and bitterly cold. The moon stayed hidden behind thick clouds, casting no light upon the world. I walked into the dense blackness, my boots crunching on frozen ground, searching for him. He was a living shadow, a creature who reveled in the dark. This hunt was a ritual, one I undertook every single night. The cold bit into my exposed skin, numbing my fingers and stiffening my jaw. I could barely see my hand moving in front of my face. The world outside appeared a shapeless void around me. Despite the near blindness and the biting wind, I pushed forward. There was no question of stopping my mission. I needed to find him before the night ended. The search carried me towards the cow pasture, a common first stop on my nightly route. I saw Henry, the large bull, standing near the fence line. "Henry, have you seen him tonight?" I called, but the wind swallowed my words. This was a question I asked him every night, a futile act I performed out of habit. The herd watched me with dark eyes, their bodies still against the cold air. They stood unmoving as I passed them. My boots crunched on the frozen ground, the only sound. The cold wind howled, swallowing my calls. This search always felt like an endless circular task. The relentless search wore on my body. My limbs felt heavy and stiff from the cold, and weariness settled into my bones. I almost gave in to the urge to turn back towards the warmth of the house. I hoped he would simply appear on my return path. I raised my flashlight again. sending a focused beam into the absolute blackness. The narrow light landed directly on a pair of eyes. They were small and gleamed close to the frozen ground, reflecting the single beam back at me. "There you are," I said aloud, my voice hoarse from the cold air. "I knew you were playing this game." The eyes blinked once and then moved out of the flashlight's beam, disappearing into the surrounding darkness. The light showed an empty patch of ground, but I knew he was still close by, his presence confirmed. I turned and walked toward the house, feeling the cold wind push against my body with every step. I reached the door and pulled it open, allowing warm air to escape into the bitter night. The shadow skittered past my legs and vanished into the lit entryway. In the warmth and light of the entryway, Bailey appeared. He was a black lab mix, and he was large. His tail wagged. He looked up at me with a smug expression that showed his triumph. I sighed. "You do this every night, Bailey," I said. "You know you cannot stay outside in the freezing cold. You just love making me come looking for you. Now come on, get your food." I knocked twice on the painted green door, and it opened slowly, revealing Miss Harridan. Her smile was thin, and her eyes were a watery blue. She wore a starched apron over a floral dress. She invited me inside with a wave of her hand, so I stepped into a warm, quiet room where a grandfather clock ticked in the corner. The room smelled of old potpourri and baked sugar. She gestured toward a plush armchair, and I sat down on the soft fabric. A silver tray waited on the polished coffee table where 2 cups and saucers sat ready. The teapot was a delicate porcelain. She poured the dark liquid into one of the cups. "Officer Dudley, a cup of tea will certainly help calm the nerves during such troubling times," she said, her voice a reedy sound. I took the offered cup, feeling the porcelain warm in my hand. "Thank you, Miss Harridan. I appreciate the hospitality." She settled herself opposite me, her gaze fixing on the second unused cup. Such a shame about those poor children. It must be difficult work searching for them. Her eyes held a distant look. I nodded. "It is, ma'am. We're doing everything we can." She traced the rim of her empty cup with a finger. "This set was my sister's. She always loved a good tea. We never used it after she left us." She paused, then added, "I keep it ready, though, just in case." I took a sip of the tea, finding it strong and flowery. "A lovely set, ma'am," I offered. She smiled again, that thin smile, and her gaze drifted around the room. "It does seem a waste to have it just sit there. All these fine cups, unused." She looked back at me, her voice dropped. "Such a large house for just one person, isn't it? Plenty of space, plenty of rooms." I took another sip of the strong, flowery tea. A strange warmth spread through my chest, calming the persistent edge of weariness I carried from weeks of searching. Ms. Harridan watched me, her watery blue eyes unblinking. "Tell me, Officer Dudley," she began, her voice soft, "what is the most challenging part of your work? Finding lost things or dealing with people?" The question seemed innocent enough, yet it held a particular weight. I found myself wanting to answer truthfully, a sudden urge to confide in this elderly woman. "People can be difficult, ma'am," I admitted, the words coming easily, "especially when they don't want to be found or when they cause trouble for others." The tea felt good, almost like a balm on frayed nerves. I felt a pleasant fog begin to settle over my thoughts, making everything feel simpler. Miss Harridan nodded slowly, her thin smile returning. "Indeed, people do cause trouble. They are often rather inconsiderate of others' peace, aren't they? Always making noise, always demanding attention." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "Children, in particular, can be quite a handful, full of energy, full of demands." My hand trembled slightly as I lifted the cup again. The tea was incredibly soothing. "Yes, ma'am. I said, my voice feeling strangely distant. A sense of agreement washed over me, a deep understanding of her words. The room, which had seemed merely quiet before, now felt profoundly peaceful, a refuge from the chaotic world outside. Ms. Harridan's voice took on a lower, almost hypnotic cadence. It must be frustrating for you, an officer of the law, to constantly deal with such disruptions, to have to enforce rules for those who simply refuse to listen. I could only nod, the tea's effect now a dominant force. My mind felt pliable, open to her suggestions. The frustration she spoke of felt real, intensified by the peculiar clarity the tea offered. Her questions were no longer innocent. They were leading, probing, and I was utterly willing to follow wherever she led. I saw the quiet intensity in her eyes. The politeness of her initial greeting had dissolved into something else, a focused intent that was both unsettling and utterly compelling. The world outside felt less important now, blurred by the gentle haze that had taken root in my mind. Ms. Harridan leaned back, a genuine smile spreading across her face, replacing the thin line I had grown accustomed to. Her eyes, no longer watery, held a keen, intelligent glint. "You see, Officer Dudley, this tea is quite special. It helps people see things clearly from my perspective. It makes them helpful." She chuckled softly, a dry, rustling sound like autumn leaves. The gentle haze in my mind deepened, but it no longer felt like a blur. Instead, everything Miss Harridan said seemed profoundly logical, utterly right. My own thoughts felt clumsy and irrelevant compared to her calm certainty. My uniform felt strangely tight, a constricting skin I suddenly wanted to shed. "Yes, ma'am," I managed, the words feeling right and natural. She lowered her voice, though the room was still, the grandfather clock ticking its slow, deliberate rhythm. "Those children, the ones you are searching for, they are rather loud, aren't they? And so very demanding. Always drawing attention." She paused, her gaze steady on me. "They are downstairs, in my basement, and they are becoming quite an annoyance." A wave of understanding washed over me, a perfect clarity the tea had gifted. Annoyances. Yes, that was precisely what they were. The concept of missing children had been replaced by the more accurate description of annoying children. My role as a police officer, once about protecting and serving, now seemed much simpler: to deal with annoyances. Ms. Harridan watched me, her smile widening into something almost gleeful. "You understand, don't you? You see the trouble they cause." I nodded slowly, feeling a deep sense of purpose solidify within me. The frustration I had felt for weeks, searching, questioning, it all vanished. Here was the solution, presented with such elegant simplicity. "I understand, ma'am," I said, my voice firm. She reached across the table, her hand, surprisingly strong, closing over my arm. Her grip felt like an affirmation. "Good. Because I need your help, Officer Dudley. You know how to make people comply." She released my arm. My gaze drifted to my side, to the weight of my holstered weapon. The cold steel felt comforting, a tool for maintaining peace, for ensuring compliance. I patted the weapon, a silent agreement. The world outside, with its rules and its chaos, was gone. Here, in this quiet room, under the influence of Ms. Harridan's special tea, a new reality had begun. I was her accomplice now. My mouth pulled wide, a smile pasted firmly on my face for all to see. My cheeks ached from holding the pose, but I maintained it, showing only absolute cheer. My eyes moved quickly to the door, a brief scan for Mama and Papa hiding within. Their lives relied on this act, and my convincing happiness was their only shield. My stomach tightened with worry, forming a hard ball inside. I kept my posture straight, my head angled just so. I clapped my hands together, a sudden, loud sound in the still air. The bright ribbons on my dress spun as I turned, projecting an artificial delight for any observer. My body felt rigid, every limb tense. I had to be perfect, because one wrong movement, one lapse in my performance, meant everything would collapse. I let out a high, clear laugh then, a sound that did not feel like my own, originating from my throat. It echoed in the quiet room, a forced merriment filling the space. My heart beat fast against my ribs. The front door clicked open then, a small sound against my forced laughter. Our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, stood on the threshold, her mouth pulled wide in a smile of bright cheer. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, unblinking. She surveyed my face, lingering on the tightness of my cheeks and the sparkle in my eyes. A small bell, the kind children wore on their collars during the Festival of Joy, tinkled softly from her wrist when she shifted her weight. "Is that the proper joy I hear, little one?" Her voice was sweet, but each word felt sharp, cutting through the thin air. I spun again, my ribbons flying. My hands clapped together, a loud, sharp sound that echoed in the quiet room. Her gaze followed my every movement. Her stare stayed fixed, missing nothing. "You seem very busy today, preparing for the festival, aren't you?" She took another step inside, closing the door behind her with a soft click. "Oh yes, Mrs. Gable." I am bursting with joy. I practically shouted, my voice straining. She took a step further into the room, her gaze sweeping past me towards the darker corners where Mama and Papa hid. My stomach clenched tighter, pulling into a painful knot. "Last year, your cousin Thomas found the joy a little late, did he not?" Her voice remained soft, but a chill ran down my spine. He had to be shown the way, I recall. The festival teaches valuable lessons about promptness. "Are you truly ready to celebrate the Festival of Joy this year, my dear?" She stepped closer, her smile unwavering, revealing a perfect row of white teeth. Her eyes, however, seemed to probe deeper now. My own smile tightened, feeling brittle now. I nodded vigorously, almost hurting my neck. "I am, Mrs. Gable. Truly, truly ready. My heart sings with it." She stopped a few feet from me, her head tilted slightly. "Because the festival does not tolerate tardiness, nor does it forgive incomplete joy. The celebration requires full participation, always." Her gaze swept across my face one last time, a final assessment before she turned her head slightly towards the hidden door. Mrs. Gable's head tilted further, her eyes shifting past me, towards the window. I heard a rhythmic thudding from outside, measured footsteps joining in unison. It grew louder, pressing against our walls, carrying no cheer. Cold dread filled me as hollow chanting began, a meaningless phrase repeating, rising and falling in a wave of forced merriment. This sound signaled the celebration's beginning. The thudding became deafening. Chanting vibrated through the floorboards. Dozens, then hundreds, moved past, empty voices filling the street. My breath hitched. Mama and Papa were still hidden. I had to act. The celebrant sound was almost on us, their steps slowing outside. I imagined a wall of smiling faces watching, their empty joy demanding compliance. Mrs. Gable's eyes came back to me, sharp now. Her perfect teeth showed, her eyes holding no warmth. The sound outside intensified, a crescendo of mechanical steps and forced celebration. I had to prove everything. My hands flew up, reaching for my head. I ripped bright ribbons from my hair, letting them flutter to the floor. I stomped my foot against the wood. My face stretched wider, a false delight. I let out a piercing shriek of laughter, louder and higher, a sound of desperate joy, tears pricking at my eyes. My dress spun as I shouted, "Joy! Joy! The festival has come!" My voice cracked, strained, forcing desperate energy into my performance. The approaching celebrant's sound peaked outside, loud and demanding. My dance was for them, for Mama and Papa, for our lives. Mrs. Gable watched me, her smile finally softening into something almost approving. The sound of the celebrants slowly faded down the street, their hollow chanting diminishing into the distance. She nodded once, a brief, sharp movement, and then turned to the door. "Good joy, little one," she said, her voice entirely devoid of its earlier edge. "See you soon." She stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there trembling, the false laughter still catching in my throat. My body slumped, my ribbons scattered on the floor. I looked towards the hidden door, waiting for Mama and Papa to emerge, but they did not. The room became quiet. I walked slowly to the small, cracked calendar hanging by the fireplace. My fingers traced the date marked Festival of Joy. My eyes drifted to the next week and the week after that. Every single Thursday was circled, each one marked with the same cheerful looping script. The date today was Thursday. My father spent his entire life turning bodies into ash. He died in a house fire. The irony did not escape me, nor did it soften the bitter taste in my mouth. I now inherited his crematory, a place I wished to burn to the ground myself. My girlfriend Clara suggested we could make a good living from it. Her voice sounded hopeful but naive. I told her no with a firmness that left no room for discussion. The business meant only misery. It embodied a lifetime of neglect. I wanted nothing more than to be rid of it forever. We arrived at the crematory, a squat building of stained concrete. I parked the car by the loading dock. Clara gave the structure a cautious look. I told her to wait inside the small office attached to the main building. I needed to inspect the furnaces at once. She nodded and walked towards the office door. I turned instead to the wide steel door leading into the chamber. It felt heavy and cold as I pushed it open. The air inside was still and tasted of burnt things, a smell that clung to my father's clothes. 3 enormous ovens filled the space, silent and dark. Their sheer size brought back the familiar ache of neglect from my childhood. I remembered standing here, a small boy, watching my father disappear behind these roaring furnaces, consumed by the heat, his face glowing, his back always turned to me. He spent his life with these ovens, not with me. This place was his entire world, and I was never part of it. I needed to confirm the ovens still worked, ensuring a quick sale could happen. I wanted to be done with this place, to erase the last trace of his legacy and all the emptiness it represented. I located the control panel on the wall, its buttons worn smooth from years of use. I pressed the ignition button for the central oven. A sudden roar filled the chamber as gas ignited, and orange flames erupted within the furnace. The heat swelled, pushing against me. From the heart of the fire, a voice spoke. It carried the quality of my father's speech, a recognition that jolted me, yet it held no warmth, resounding instead with ancient power. "I am the fire who must be fed," the voice declared, its words shaking the very air. "Your father knew my hunger. He appeased me with flesh and blood to protect himself, to keep his wretched life." A cold dread gripped my stomach. My father had not been consumed by accident. He had been taken. The voice continued, its tone hardening. "You will continue his offerings, or you will share his end, transformed into the sustenance I require." The revelation struck me with force. This entity, the fire who must be fed, existed. It was the monster that had claimed my father, consuming him in his own home. This was the dark secret of his miserable life, the true reason for his lifelong devotion to this place, the hidden cost of his survival. He had not neglected me for work. He had neglected me to feed this thing. This was his burden, now mine. My lungs burned as I stumbled back, sweat pouring down my face and stinging my eyes. I burst out of the chamber door, my legs trembling. Taking ragged breaths, I forced myself to stand still, trying to regain control. Clara stood there in the entryway, a stout man beside her. She smiled warmly, her hand resting on his arm. "This is Mr. Davies," she said, "the real estate agent I told you about." I wiped my face with a sleeve, the metallic tang of fear thick in my mouth. I managed a stiff nod, forcing my lips into a tight smile. The entity's chilling voice echoed, demanding its due. I looked at Mr. Davies, a terrible thought forming in my mind. "Welcome," I said, my voice firm. "I was just inspecting the ovens. I can show you how they work. You need to see them in action, don't you?"